I'm so sorry. I thought I brought enough, the elderly woman whispered shakily as she realized she was 85 cents short for a can of soup, a loaf of bread, and a small carton of milk. Behind her, irritated customers sighed loudly, their judgment filling the grocery. Her cheeks flushed with humiliation, looked as if she might cry. Then suddenly, an exhausted young cashier did something no one expected. He quietly reached into his nearly empty wallet and gave the woman his very last dollar. What happened next didn't just ease her shame. It's a moment that will warm your heart. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hype and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The clock above register 4 at Morrison's grocery read 8:42 p.m. on a cold November evening when Marcus Turner noticed the woman's hands begin to shake. He'd been working since noon, a double shift because Jenny had called in sick again, and his feet ached in the cheap sneakers that were already wearing through at the heels. But something about the way this elderly woman stood at his register, counting and recounting the coins in her weathered palm, made him forget his exhaustion. Marcus was 18 years old, though people often mistook him for older. Responsibility had a way of aging you, of putting weight in your eyes that had nothing to do with years. His navy blue Morrison's vest hung loose on his thin frame. He'd lost weight lately, skipping lunches to save money, and his name tag sat slightly crooked no matter how many times he straightened it. "I'm so sorry," the woman whispered, her voice cultured despite the tremor. "I thought I had enough." She'd placed 3 items on the belt, 1 can of chicken noodle soup, 1 loaf of white bread, 1 small carton of milk. The total came to $8.45. In her palm, she held $7 exactly in crumpled bills and a handful of coins. Marcus watched her count again. 6 quarters, 3 dimes, 2 nickels, $7.60 total. "I'm short," she said, and her cheeks flushed with shame. "I'm 85 cents short." Behind her the line was growing. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his watch with pointed impatience, then began tapping his fingers on the handle of his basket. The rhythmic drumming grew louder, more aggressive. A woman with 2 children sighed heavily, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Come on, lady," the businessman muttered, loud enough to be heard. "Some of us have places to be." The elderly woman flinched as if she'd been struck. Her hands trembled harder as she reached for the soup. "I'll put this back. I don't need the soup." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. She wore a brown wool coat that had probably been expensive 30 years ago, now worn at the cuffs and missing a button. Her silver hair was pulled back in a careful bun, maintained with the kind of dignity that spoke of a woman who refused to let circumstances define her worth. Her shoes were polished despite being old, her posture straight despite the weight of her shame. And suddenly, Marcus wasn't standing in Morrison's grocery anymore. He was 7 years old, standing next to his mother in a different store, watching her count pennies for bread, while other customers sighed and complained behind them. He was 10, holding his mother's hand while the pharmacist told them her medication cost more than they had. He was 12, watching Grandma Lorraine skip meals so he could eat, pretending she wasn't hungry when he knew she was. He was 18, and he had $7.50 in his wallet, every penny he had left until payday on Friday, 3 days away. He'd been planning to buy ramen and maybe some marked-down bananas for Grandma. But this woman needed her dignity more than he needed dinner. Marcus's hand moved to his back pocket before he could second-guess himself. He pulled out his thin wallet, extracted a single dollar bill, and placed it quietly next to the woman's money. "Ma'am," he said softly, meeting her eyes, "this one's on me today." Her eyes widened, bright blue and suddenly swimming with tears. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly, please." Marcus picked up the dollar and her 7, feeding them into the register. "Consider it a gift. Everybody needs a little help sometimes." He bagged her items carefully, placing the bread on top so it wouldn't get crushed, making sure the milk carton was upright. The whole transaction took maybe 15 seconds, but the woman stood there for a long moment, staring at him as if trying to memorize his face. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice breaking. "You have no idea what this means. Thank you, young man." Marcus glanced at his name tag, making sure she could see it. "You have a good evening, ma'am. Stay warm out there." She nodded, clutching her bag to her chest and walked away. But not before Marcus saw her pause just beyond his line of sight, one hand pressed to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent tears. The businessman threw his items onto the belt with unnecessary force. "Finally, you know you shouldn't encourage people like that. If she can't afford groceries, maybe she shouldn't be shopping." Marcus scanned the man's items without responding. Organic vegetables, expensive cheese, a bottle of wine that cost more than Marcus made in a day. He took the man's credit card, processed the payment, and handed back the receipt with the same professional courtesy he gave everyone. "Have a good night, sir." After the man left, Marcus's manager Tom Rodriguez appeared at his elbow. Tom was in his 40s, with tired eyes that had seen too much retail life, but he'd always been fair to Marcus. "I saw what you did," Tom said quietly. Marcus's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to." "Hey." Tom held up a hand. "I'm not mad, I'm just saying I saw it. That was a good thing you did. World needs more of that." He paused. "You doing okay? You've been picking up a lot of extra shifts." "I'm fine. Grandma's medical bills have been a little high lately, but we're managing." Tom nodded, understanding in his expression. "If you need anything, advance on your paycheck, anything, you let me know, okay?" "Thanks, Tom." The rest of Marcus's shift passed in a blur of scanning groceries and counting change. By the time 10 p.m. arrived and he could finally clock out, his legs were shaking with exhaustion. The bus ride home took 40 minutes, carrying him from the nice part of town with its well-lit streets and clean storefronts to the neighborhood where streetlights were broken more often than not, and security bars covered most windows. The apartment building on Riverside Avenue was 4 stories of weathered brick that had been old when Grandma Lorraine was young. The elevator had been broken for 3 years, so Marcus climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, his legs protesting every step. He could smell dinner before he reached their door. Something simple but good. Chicken, probably, with rice. His stomach growled so loudly, it echoed in the stairwell. "There's my boy," Grandma Lorraine said when Marcus walked in. She was 76 years old, with white hair kept in short curls and hands that didn't work quite right anymore because of arthritis. But her smile was warm, and her eyes were sharp. She'd stayed up waiting for him, even though he'd told her 100 times not to. Even though he knew her back hurt from sitting too long in the old armchair they'd gotten from Goodwill 5 years ago. "Grandma, you should be in bed. It's late." "Nonsense. Can't sleep knowing you haven't eaten." She started to push herself up, and Marcus hurried over. "I'll get my own plate." "You stay there. Already made you one. It's in the oven, keeping warm." Marcus found the plate, chicken with rice and green beans, more food than they could really afford, and brought it to the coffee table they used for everything from dining to homework to bill paying. He made Grandma a small plate too, even though she protested. "Tell me about your day," she said, picking at her food. "Same as always. Busy." Marcus didn't mention the $1 he'd given away. Grandma would understand, she'd raised him to be kind, but she'd also worry about how they'd make it to payday. "You eating enough? You look thinner." "I'm fine, Grandma." She gave him a look that said she knew exactly what he was doing, but she didn't push. They both understood the mathematics of poverty, the way you made small sacrifices so the people you loved wouldn't have to. After dinner, Marcus washed the dishes while Grandma settled in to watch her evening game show. He cleaned the tiny kitchen until it shone, then kissed her forehead and told her he was going to bed. In his narrow room, barely big enough for a twin bed and a small desk, Marcus lay down fully clothed, too tired to change. On his wall hung his acceptance letter from State University, pinned above a photograph of his mother. She'd been 28 in that picture, laughing at something outside the frame, alive and healthy and full of dreams for her son. She died when Marcus was 12, cancer that had spread too fast and cost too much to treat properly. His father had left when Marcus was 4, and Marcus barely remembered him. It had been just Marcus and Mom and Grandma for as long as memory served. When Mom died, it became just Marcus and Grandma. Marcus had earned a full scholarship to state academic merit, combined with financial need. Full tuition, room and board, everything. He'd been planning to start this past fall. But then Grandma's medical bills had gotten worse, and the rent had increased, and someone needed to work, so Marcus had deferred. Just for a semester, he'd told himself. Then it became a year, now it had been 18 months, and that future felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. He closed his eyes and did what he did every night, counted his blessings. Grandma was still here, they had a roof however leaky, he had a job, however temporary it felt. Tomorrow would come, and he'd face it. But tonight, as he drifted off to sleep, he thought about the elderly woman and her 85 cents, and he wondered if she'd made it home safely, if she'd eaten her soup, if she'd be all right. He had no way of knowing that in giving away his last $1, he just changed both of their lives forever. Marcus woke to rain pounding against his window, and Grandma Lorraine coughing in the next room. The cough had been getting worse lately, deep and rattling, the kind that made his chest tight with worry. He'd been trying to save enough for a doctor's visit, but the free clinic was backed up for months, and the urgent care places charged more than they had. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to make sure the coughing stopped. It did, eventually, and he heard Grandma shuffling to the bathroom. Only then did he let himself breathe. Thursday, he had the opening shift at Morrison's, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. He needed to be up anyway. In the kitchen, Marcus made oatmeal for both of them, the cheap kind that came in a huge cylinder and tasted like paste unless you added enough sugar. They were out of sugar. He added a little cinnamon instead, hoping it would help. "You don't have to make me breakfast," Grandma said, appearing in her threadbare robe. "I can manage." "I know you can, but I'm already up, so let me." They ate in comfortable silence, the rain creating a steady rhythm against the windows. Grandma kept trying to hide her coughs, and Marcus kept pretending he didn't notice. "I'll pick up your prescription refill tomorrow," Marcus said, even though he wasn't sure how he'd pay for it. Maybe Tom would let him have that advance after all. "Don't you worry about me. I'm fine." "Grandma," Marcus, her voice was gentle but firm. "I've been managing my health for 76 years. I think I can handle a little cough." He wanted to argue, wanted to insist that this was more than a little cough, that she needed proper medical care, that he was scared of losing her the way he'd lost Mom, but he just nodded and finished his oatmeal. The bus to Morrison's was crowded with morning commuters, everyone pressed together in damp coats that smelled like wet wool and resignation. Marcus stood near the back, holding onto the overhead rail, watching the city wake up through rain-streaked windows. At Morrison's, Tom was already there, looking more tired than usual. Jenny called in again, he said by way of greeting. "Think you can stay late if we need you?" "Sure." "How late?" "Maybe until 7, I'll pay you overtime." "Overtime? That would help with Grandma's prescription." "Yeah, I can do that." The morning shift passed in its usual rhythm. Customers with their morning coffee runs, their pre-work grocery trips, their small purchases and large complaints. Marcus scanned items with mechanical efficiency, made small talk when required, and tried not to think about how his feet already hurt and he had 11 more hours to go. Around 11 a.m., he saw her. The elderly woman from yesterday was back, standing at the entrance, looking uncertain. She wore the same brown coat, but today she had an umbrella, old but functional, and her hair was covered with a clear plastic rain bonnet that reminded Marcus of something from an old movie. She was scanning the checkout lanes, clearly looking for something, or someone. Their eyes met across the store, and her face transformed. She smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, and made her way to his register even though his line was longer than the others. "Good morning, ma'am," Marcus said when she reached him. "How are you today?" "I'm well, thank you. And please call me Margaret." "Margaret Hayes." She set her purse on the counter and began digging through it. "I came back because I wanted to hear it is." She pulled out a small envelope and offered it to Marcus. "I wanted to return your kindness, and to properly thank you." Marcus could feel the weight of bills inside the envelope. His heart sank. "Ma'am Margaret, you don't need to do that. It was just $1. "It wasn't just $1 to me." Her voice was quiet but intense. "Last night I was able to eat dinner, a simple dinner, but enough. Because of your kindness. And I thought about you all evening, wondering if you'd eaten, if you had enough for yourself." "I'm fine," Marcus lied. "Really?" Nevertheless, she pressed the envelope into his hand. "Please, let me return this." Marcus looked at the envelope, then at Margaret's face. She needed to do this, he realized. Needed to feel like the exchange was balanced, like she wasn't a charity case. He understood that feeling intimately. "How about this?" he said carefully. "How about instead of giving me money, you just come through my line whenever you shop here? Say hello, let me know you're doing okay. That would mean more to me than any money." Margaret studied him for a long moment. "You're a remarkable young man. Has anyone ever told you that?" Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. "I'm just doing what my mom taught me." Then she must have been a remarkable woman. Margaret put the envelope back in her purse. "All right, I'll come say hello, but Marcus, may I call you Marcus?" "Of course, if you ever need anything at all, you come find me. I live in the apartments on Oak Street, Building C, Unit 214. Will you remember that? Oak Street, Building C, 214. "I'll remember." "Good." She purchased a few items more than yesterday, Marcus noticed, and as he bagged them, she said, "Are you in school, Marcus? You seem too bright to be just working here." The question stung, though he knew she didn't mean it to. "I was going to start at State University. But circumstances changed. This is where I need to be right now." Understanding crossed her face. "Family, my grandmother. She raised me after my mother passed. Now it's my turn to take care of her." Margaret nodded slowly. "That's a noble thing you're doing. Not many young people would make that choice. It's not really a choice. She's all I have." Still, Margaret took her bag. "I'll see you soon, Marcus, and thank you again. You'll never know what you did for me." After she left, Marcus felt strangely lighter, as if their brief conversation had lifted some weight he'd been carrying. The rest of his shift passed more quickly, and when Tom asked if he could actually stay until closing at 10, Marcus agreed. The extra money would help. It always helped. By the time he got home at 10:45, Grandma was asleep in her chair, the TV playing softly. Marcus turned it off, covered her with a blanket, and left her there. Moving her to bed would wake her, and she needed the rest. In his room, Marcus counted his money. $42.30 until payday. Grandma's prescription would be $30, that left $12.30 for food, bus fare, and anything else that came up. He could make it work. He always did. He fell asleep still wearing his Morrison's vest, too exhausted to even change, and dreamed of nothing at all. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus saw Margaret 5 more times at Morrison's. Each visit, she came through his line specifically, sometimes buying just 1 or 2 small items, always stopping to ask how he was doing, how his grandmother was feeling. Their conversations were brief. There were always other customers waiting, but Marcus found himself looking forward to seeing her. She reminded him of his mother somehow, in the way she listened, like what he said actually mattered, in the way her eyes lit up when she smiled. On a gray Saturday afternoon in early December, Marcus's shift ended at 3 p.m. He was walking to the bus stop, hands shoved deep in his thin jacket pockets, when he heard someone call his name. Margaret was standing outside a small diner 2 blocks from Morrison's, waving at him. "Marcus, do you have a moment?" He walked over, confused. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I was just having a late lunch and saw you walk by. Would you join me?" "My treat." Marcus hesitated. He needed to get home to Grandma. But she was with Patricia, the neighbor who sometimes checked in on her, and the thought of a real meal, something hot and filling, was almost overwhelming. "Just for a little while," Margaret added, seeing his hesitation. "I could use the company, if I'm being honest. Eating alone gets old." "Okay. Thank you." The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and French fries. Margaret led him to a booth near the window, and they sat across from each other. A waitress appeared immediately with menus and coffee. "Order whatever you like," Margaret said. "I'm serious, whatever you want." Marcus ordered carefully. A burger and fries, nothing fancy, nothing too expensive, but when it arrived, it was the best thing he'd tasted in months. Real beef, not the cheap frozen patties he usually managed. Fresh fries, hot and salty. He had to force himself not to eat too fast, not to look like he was starving, even though he was. Margaret ordered soup and watched him eat with a small smile. "How is your grandmother doing?" she asked. "She has a cough that won't go away. I'm worried about her, but she refuses to see a doctor unless it gets really bad. Medical care is expensive." "Yeah." Marcus didn't elaborate, but he didn't need to. Margaret understood. "Tell me about her," Margaret said. "What's she like?" So Marcus did. He told her about how Grandma Lorraine had raised him after his mother died, how she'd worked 2 jobs until arthritis made it impossible, how she still tried to take care of him, even though their roles had reversed. He told her about Sunday mornings when Grandma made pancakes, about how she knew every show on TV, but pretended she didn't, so Marcus could explain the plots to her, about how she still called him baby, even though he was 18 and taller than her. Margaret listened to all of it, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, her eyes soft with understanding at the hard parts. "She sounds wonderful," Margaret said when Marcus finished. "You're lucky to have each other." "I am. I just wish I could give her more. Better apartment, better doctors, the things she deserves. You give her your presence and your love, that's worth more than money." "Maybe, but money would help with the rent and the medical bills." Margaret was quiet for a moment, stirring her soup. "Can I tell you something, Marcus?" About myself. Of course, I wasn't always alone, she said, her voice distant. I had a husband. Richard. We were married for 42 years, he died 8 years ago. Heart attack, very sudden, and we had a daughter, Catherine. She's 43 now, married, lives in Connecticut with her husband and 2 children. That's nice, Marcus said, though something in Margaret's tone suggested it wasn't entirely nice. Catherine and I, we don't talk much. Once or twice a year maybe. Christmas, my birthday if she remembers. She's very busy with her life, her family, and I think. Margaret paused, choosing her words carefully. I think she's ashamed of me now, of how I live. I don't understand. Margaret smiled sadly. Richard and I were quite well off once. He had a successful business, we had a big house, country club memberships, all of it, but after he died, I discovered he'd made some poor investments. There were debts I didn't know about. The business failed, I lost almost everything. Marcus stared at her. I'm so sorry. Don't be, things are just things. But Catherine, she took it hard, she'd grown up with money, married someone with money, built her whole life around a certain standard. When I couldn't maintain that standard anymore, when I had to move to a small apartment and live on Social Security, she distanced herself. She sends money sometimes, but she doesn't visit, doesn't call much. I think it's too uncomfortable for her, seeing what I've become. You haven't become anything bad, Marcus said firmly. You're still her mother. Thank you, dear, but it's complicated. I don't blame her, not really, I just miss her sometimes. Miss my grandchildren, who barely know me. Margaret's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That's why your kindness meant so much, Marcus. You saw me as a person, not as someone to be pitied or avoided. They sat in silence for a moment, the diner noise a comfortable backdrop. Would you like to meet her? Marcus asked suddenly. My grandmother, I think you two would like each other. Margaret's face lit up. I would love that. Are you sure? Absolutely, she's always telling me I need to make friends. She'll be thrilled. And so on a Tuesday evening the following week, Marcus brought Margaret Hayes home to meet Grandma Lorraine. The apartment had never looked smaller, or more worn. Marcus saw it through Margaret's eyes, the water-stained ceiling, the furniture held together with duct tape and hope, the single space heater they used because the building's heat was unreliable. But Margaret walked in like she was entering a palace, and when Grandma Lorraine extended her hand, Margaret took it warmly. Mrs. Turner, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Marcus has told me so much about you. Please call me Lorraine, and the pleasure's mine. Any friend of Marcus's is welcome here. They had dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti with sauce from a jar, but the conversation flowed easily. Grandma and Margaret swapped stories about raising children alone, about making do with little, about the small joys that made hard lives bearable. They laughed together, finished each other's sentences, connected in the way people do when they recognize themselves in each other. Marcus watched them, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He'd brought 2 lonely people together, and they were filling some empty space in each other's lives. Before Margaret left, Grandma pulled her aside. Marcus couldn't hear what they said, but he saw Margaret nod, saw her squeeze Grandma's hand, saw something pass between them that didn't need words. Same time next week, Margaret asked as Marcus walked her to the door. Absolutely. After she left, Grandma turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. That woman has been through some hard times. But she's good people, Marcus. Real good people. I know, Grandma, you did a good thing, bringing her here. She needs family, even if it's not blood. Marcus thought about that, as he cleaned up the dinner dishes. Family didn't have to be blood. Family could be chosen, built from kindness and shared understanding, and the simple act of showing up. He didn't know it yet, but this new family he was building would save him in ways he couldn't imagine, and he would save them right back. Over the next 6 weeks, as December turned into January, Margaret became a regular presence in Marcus and Grandma Lorraine's life. She came for dinner twice a week, sometimes bringing ingredients for recipes she wanted to share. She and Grandma would spend hours talking while Marcus did homework from his old textbooks, keeping his mind sharp even though he wasn't in school. Marcus also started visiting Margaret's apartment on Oak Street. It was small but neat, with furniture that had clearly seen better days but was well maintained. The walls were mostly bare, except for one large family photograph in the living room, a younger Margaret with a handsome man and a teenage girl, all of them smiling at some long-ago celebration. "That's Richard and Catherine," Margaret said the first time Marcus visited, following his gaze. Catherine was 16 there. Before everything got complicated. "Have you talked to her lately?" "Not in 4 months. I called on her birthday in September, but she was busy, said she'd call me back." Margaret's smile was sad. "She hasn't yet." Marcus spent those visits helping Margaret with things around the apartment, fixing a leaky faucet, replacing light bulbs she couldn't reach, moving furniture when she wanted to rearrange. In return, Margaret fed him, told him stories, and occasionally slipped him a $20 bill for bus fare that they both knew he'd spend on groceries for Grandma. It felt good, having this routine, having Margaret in their lives. She filled a space that had been empty since Mom died, not replacing her, never that, but adding something Marcus hadn't known he needed. Then on a cold Thursday afternoon, in late January, everything shifted. Marcus had the day off, and he promised to help Margaret reorganize her closet. He arrived at her apartment around 10 a.m., knocked twice as usual, and opened the door when she called out. But instead of just Margaret, there was a sleek black luxury sedan parked in the guest space outside her building. Marcus noticed it, but didn't think much of it until he walked inside and saw her. The woman was in her early 40s, blonde hair in a perfect style, wearing clothes that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. She stood in Margaret's living room with her arms crossed, radiating disapproval. "Mom, you can't be serious," the woman was saying. "This place is falling apart. The neighborhood is." She stopped when she saw Marcus, her eyes widening slightly, taking in his old jeans, his worn jacket, his dark skin. Her expression shifted, becoming harder. "Who's this?" Margaret's face was flushed, whether from embarrassment or anger Marcus couldn't tell. "Catherine, this is Marcus. He's my friend. Marcus, this is my daughter Catherine Wellings." Marcus extended his hand, trying to ignore the way his heart was hammering. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Wellings." Catherine looked at his hand like it might be contaminated, then gave it the briefest shake possible, barely making contact. "Yes, hello." She turned back to Margaret, her voice tight. "Mom, we need to talk. Privately. Anything you have to say you can say in front of Marcus." "I don't think that's appropriate, Marcus," Margaret said, her voice strained in a way he'd never heard before. "Would you mind waiting in the kitchen for a moment? This won't take long." Marcus nodded and retreated to the small kitchen, but the apartment was tiny and the walls were thin. He could hear every word. "Mom, what are you thinking?" Catherine's voice was low but intense. "Do you know how this looks? An elderly woman living alone befriending some random black teenager from the neighborhood. People might think what, Catherine?" Margaret's voice was sharp, angry. "That I have a friend who cares about me. That someone sees me as a person worth knowing. That's not what I mean. I'm worried about you, about your safety. You don't know anything about this boy, about his background, his intentions. I know that he gave me his last dollar when I needed it. I know that he visits me twice a week to help with things I can't do myself. I know that he's sacrificed his entire future to take care of his sick grandmother. What do I know about him? I know he's shown me more kindness in 2 months than my own daughter has shown in 2 years. That's not fair, Mom. I'm busy, I have responsibilities." "You have excuses." Margaret's voice rose. "Marcus has responsibilities too, a sick grandmother, a job, a future he's sacrificing to take care of family. But he still finds time to visit me, to help me, to treat me like I matter. When's the last time you did that? Don't you dare compare me to some stranger who probably just wants." The sound of Margaret's hand hitting the counter was sharp and sudden. "Get out, Mom, get out of my home. I won't listen to you insult someone who's shown me nothing but respect and kindness. I won't let you stand in my home and spew your ignorance and your prejudice. You're being ridiculous. I came here because I'm worried about you. No, you came here because your guilt finally got too heavy and you needed to assuage it with a quick visit before you go back to pretending I don't exist. Well, I don't need that kind of concern. I don't need a daughter who only shows up to judge me and the people I care about. So please, leave." There was a long, tense silence. Then Catherine's voice, cold and hard. "Fine. When you're ready to be reasonable, you have my number. But don't expect me to support whatever this situation is. And don't expect me to apologize for being concerned about my own mother's safety." Footsteps. The door opening and closing, not quite slamming but close. Then silence. Marcus waited a full minute before returning to the living room. Margaret was sitting on her couch, hands clasped in her lap, tears streaming down her face. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the confrontation. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that," she said without looking up. "Don't apologize." Marcus sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "You were defending me. I should be apologizing to you. I've caused problems between you and your daughter." "No." Margaret's voice was fierce despite the tears. "You've been nothing but good to me. Catherine's the one with the problem and she needs to face it herself." She wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I'm so sorry for what she said. The things she implied about you, about your intentions. That's not who I raised her to be. People say things they don't mean when they're scared," Marcus said quietly. He'd learned this from Grandma, from watching her navigate difficult situations with grace. "Maybe she's scared of losing you and doesn't know how to deal with it, so it comes out as anger." Margaret looked at him, something like wonder in her expression. "How did you get so wise at 18? My grandma, she's always saying hurt people, hurt people. The key is not letting their hurt become your hurt." "That's very wise." Margaret took a shaky breath. Still, what she said was inexcusable, and I meant what I told her. She doesn't get to come into my life once in a blue moon and judge the people who've actually been here for me. They sat together in silence for a while, until Margaret's tears dried and her breathing steadied. The closet reorganization felt inappropriate now, too trivial after what had just happened. "Do you want me to go?" Marcus asked. "Give you some space?" "No, actually I'd like you to stay if you don't mind. Maybe we could just watch TV or something. I don't want to be alone right now." Of course, they spent the next 2 hours watching old game shows, not talking much, just being together. And somehow that quiet companionship helped more than any words could have. That evening, Marcus told Grandma Lorraine what had happened. She listened carefully, her face growing more troubled as the story went on. "That poor woman," she finally said. "Both of them really. They're both hurting. Margaret's daughter was awful to her. To me too, but mostly to her own mother. I'm not saying she was right, baby, but think about it from her perspective. She hasn't been around, hasn't been part of her mother's life. Then she shows up and finds out her mother has built a whole relationship with someone she doesn't know. That's got to be scary. Got to bring up all kinds of guilt and fear. So I should just accept that she was racist to me? No, you should understand where it came from without taking it into your soul. There's a difference between understanding and accepting." Grandma paused, coughing into her hand. "And Marcus, you can't fix this for Margaret. This is something she and her daughter have to work through themselves." "I know, I just feel bad that I made it worse." "You didn't make anything worse, you exposed something that was already broken. Sometimes that's what needs to happen before healing can start." Marcus thought about that as he lay in bed that night. Maybe Grandma was right. Maybe Catherine needed to see what she'd been missing, needed to face her own prejudices and fears before anything could change. But he also knew that Margaret was hurting, and he hated that his presence in her life had caused that pain, even if it wasn't his fault. He fell asleep wondering if Catherine would ever come back, and what would happen if she did. February arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow. Marcus continued his routine, work at Morrison's, visits with Margaret, taking care of Grandma Lorraine. But something had changed. Margaret was quieter now, more withdrawn. The light that had returned to her eyes over their months of friendship had dimmed. She still came for dinners, still welcomed Marcus when he visited, but she kept checking her phone, hoping for a call that never came. She'd leave messages for Catherine, short, careful messages that tried not to sound desperate and get nothing in return. "Give her time," Grandma Lorraine said one evening when Margaret's eyes filled with tears over her untouched plate. "She's wrestling with something inside herself, but she'll come around. A mother's love is powerful, but so is a daughter's. They just need to find their way back to each other." "What if we never do?" Margaret whispered. "What if I've lost her for good this time?" "You haven't lost her. She's just lost right now. There's a difference." But the weeks passed, 1, 2, 3, and Catherine didn't call, didn't visit. The silence stretched like a wound that wouldn't heal. Marcus watched Margaret grow smaller under the weight of it. He tried to help, tried to fill the space Catherine had left, but he knew he couldn't replace a daughter, couldn't fix what was broken between them. Meanwhile, Grandma's cough had gotten worse. Marcus was picking up extra shifts again, trying to save for a proper doctor's visit, the free clinic still months away. The exhaustion was catching up with him, working 50 hours a week, helping Margaret, caring for Grandma, trying to keep himself together. "You're going to burn yourself out, baby," Grandma said one night when she found him asleep at the kitchen table, face down in his work schedule. "I'm okay, just tired." "You're more than tired, you're carrying too much. It's okay to ask for help." "From who, Grandma? Everyone's already doing what they can." She didn't have an answer for that. In mid-February, Marcus was at Morrison's during an evening shift when he saw something that made his heart stop. There was a woman at register 2, not his register, struggling with her purchase. She had a cart full of groceries, a baby on her hip, and a toddler pulling at her coat. When the cashier rang up her total, Marcus saw her face fall. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought I had more on my card. Can you take off some items?" The cashier, a new kid Marcus didn't know well, sighed with obvious annoyance. "Which ones?" The meat, I guess, and the fruit." And the woman's voice broke. "The diapers. Take off the diapers." Behind her, people were getting impatient. Someone muttered something about food stamps. Someone else checked their watch aggressively. The woman's face flushed with shame. The baby started crying. The toddler was whining. And Marcus saw it, that moment when dignity crumbles, when you become invisible, except as an inconvenience. He didn't think. He walked over to register 2, pulled out his wallet, and handed the cashier 2 $20 bills. "I've got the difference," Marcus said quietly. The woman turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. It's okay, we all need help sometimes." He looked at the cashier. "Ring it all up. The meat, the fruit, the diapers, everything." After the woman left, thanking him 3 times, crying, promising to pay him back someday, Marcus returned to his register. His hands were shaking. That was $40. $40 he needed for Grandma's medicine. But he'd do it again. He'd always do it again. What Marcus didn't know was that someone had been watching. Catherine Wellings had come to Morrison specifically to buy groceries in this neighborhood, in this store, not because she needed groceries. Her house in Connecticut was fully stocked. But because she'd been thinking about Marcus for 3 weeks straight, unable to shake her mother's words. "He's shown me more kindness in 2 months than you've shown in 2 years. She'd been having nightmares. In them her mother was hurt, robbed, taken advantage of, and Catherine had done nothing. Emma's disappointed face haunted her days. James's quiet judgment filled their house with tension. So she went to Morrison's. To prove she was right, yes. But also, though she wouldn't admit it, hoping she was wrong. But what she'd seen instead was a young man give away $40. $40. He clearly needed to help a stranger. No hesitation, no expectation of thanks. Just kindness offered freely to someone who needed it. Catherine sat in her Mercedes in the parking lot for 20 minutes after, hands gripping the steering wheel, replaying what she'd witnessed. She'd been so certain, so sure that Marcus had ulterior motives, that he was using her mother somehow. She'd built an entire narrative in her head, about who he was, what he wanted, and it had all been based on the color of his skin. Nothing else, just that. The shame hit her like a physical blow. She kept replaying what she'd seen. Marcus, the young man she'd accused of taking advantage of her mother, giving away $40 he clearly needed. No hesitation, no cameras watching, no one to impress, just kindness. Her phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "Did you talk to Grandma yet?" Catherine stared at the message. She'd been avoiding this for 3 weeks. Avoiding her mother, avoiding Marcus, avoiding the uncomfortable truth that she'd been wrong. No, not just wrong, racist. The word made her flinch, but it was accurate. She'd seen a young black man befriending her elderly mother, and her first thought had been danger, criminal intent, ulterior motives. Not because of anything he'd done, but because of what he looked like. Catherine thought about her own children, about the values she'd taught them. Judge people by their character, not their appearance. About Emma's disappointed face when Catherine had told her about the argument. "That's not who you taught me to be, Mom," Emma had said. The words still stung. She thought about her mother, alone in that apartment, with only Marcus for company, because Catherine had been too uncomfortable to show up. She thought about Marcus, who'd worked double shifts and skipped meals and given up his future to care for his grandmother, while Catherine had abandoned her mother, because poverty made her uncomfortable. The shame was physical, a weight in her chest that made it hard to breathe. Catherine pulled out her phone and typed a message to Emma. I need help. Can we talk about implicit bias? About how to recognize prejudice in yourself. I think I have a lot to learn. Emma's response came immediately. I'm proud of you for asking, Mom. This is the first step. Catherine sat there in the parking lot as the sun set, as the grocery store lights came on, as people came and went with their purchases and their lives. She wasn't ready to call her mother yet, wasn't ready to face Marcus, but for the first time in 3 weeks, she thought maybe, eventually she could be. Over the next week, Catherine couldn't stop thinking about what she'd witnessed. She kept seeing Marcus's face, calm, compassionate, giving away money he needed without hesitation. Kept seeing the mother's tears of gratitude, kept seeing her own prejudice reflected back at her. Emma had sent her articles, books, TED Talks, all about implicit bias, about systemic racism, about how good people could hold prejudiced views without realizing it. Catherine read them all, and it was uncomfortable. It made her confront things about herself she didn't want to see. She thought about every interaction she'd had with people of color. How she clutched her purse tighter when black teenagers walked past. How she was always slightly surprised when black professionals were articulate. How she'd never questioned these reactions before, had never examined where they came from. One article talked about the difference between not being racist and being anti-racist, about how passivity in the face of prejudice was its own form of complicity. Catherine realized she'd been passive her whole life. She'd never said anything overtly racist. She'd considered herself one of the good ones. But she'd also never done the hard work of examining her own biases, never questioned the assumptions she'd absorbed from a society built on racial hierarchy. James found her crying over her laptop one night, a week after she'd gone to Morrison's. What's wrong? He asked, sitting beside her. I've been racist, Catherine said, my whole life, and I never even knew it. You're recognizing it now, that's what matters. Is it though? I said terrible things to Marcus. I accused him. Her voice broke. James, I saw a black teenager and I assumed the worst. Not because of anything he did, just because of what he looked like. How do I come back from that? You start by being honest, with yourself, with him, with your mother. You own what you did, and then you do better. What if he won't forgive me? Then you do better anyway. Not because you expect forgiveness, but because it's right. Catherine wiped her eyes. I need to talk to Mom, and to Marcus, but I don't know what to say. Start with the truth. Tell them what you told me, that you were wrong, that you're learning, that you want to do better. What if it's too late? It's never too late to try. The next morning, Catherine did something she hadn't done in years. She got in her car and drove to her mother's apartment, not to confront, not to judge, just to see her. Margaret opened the door, surprise and wariness mixing on her face. Catherine, hi Mom. Can I come in? I won't stay long if you don't want me to, but I'd like to talk, really talk. Margaret stepped aside, letting her in. The apartment looked the same, small, worn but clean and carefully maintained. On the kitchen table, Catherine saw evidence of a recent lunch, 2 plates, 2 cups. Margaret wasn't eating alone anymore. She had someone who showed up. They sat on the couch, an awkward silence stretching between them. I've been thinking, Catherine started, then stopped, tried again. I've been thinking about what you said. About Marcus showing you more kindness than I have. And you were right, you were absolutely right. Catherine, please let me finish. I came here 3 weeks ago full of judgment and fear. I saw Marcus and I made assumptions based on nothing except my own prejudice, and I said terrible things to you about him, things I'm ashamed of. Catherine's voice wavered. Last week, I went to his grocery store. I needed to see him, needed to see if my fears were justified. And you know what I saw? What? I saw him give away $40 to a woman who couldn't afford her groceries. $40 he clearly needed for himself. He didn't hesitate, didn't expect anything in return. He just helped because someone needed help. Catherine wiped her eyes, and I realized that everything I'd said about him, every suspicion I had, it was all in my head. It was all based on my own prejudice and nothing else. Margaret took her daughter's hand. What made you go to the store? I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about how he's been there for you when I haven't. And I was angry at first, angry at you, at him, at everyone. But then Emma talked to me. really talked to me, and she made me see that I wasn't angry at Marcus. I was angry at myself, angry that a stranger was doing what I should have been doing. You've been busy, that's an excuse, Mom. We both know it. I've been avoiding you because seeing you in that apartment, living like this, it made me uncomfortable. It reminded me that life isn't always perfect, that we can lose things, that security isn't guaranteed, and instead of dealing with that discomfort, I just stayed away. They sat in silence for a moment, then Catherine said, I want to apologize to Marcus, in person. If he's willing to see me, he comes tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. If you're here, I'm sure he'll listen. And Mom, I want to do better. I want to be part of your life again. Really part of it. Can we try? Of course we can try, Margaret said, pulling her daughter close. That's all I've ever wanted. The next day Catherine arrived at Margaret's apartment at 2:45 p.m. She'd been awake most of the night, rehearsing what she'd say to Marcus, trying to find words adequate to apologize for what she'd done. At exactly 3 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Margaret let Marcus in, and Catherine saw him freeze when he spotted her on the couch. Marcus, Margaret said gently, Catherine would like to talk to you. If you're willing to listen. Marcus's face was carefully neutral, showing nothing. Okay. He sat in the chair across from Catherine, maintaining distance. His body language was closed off, protective. Catherine didn't blame him. Marcus, I need to apologize to you. Catherine's voice was steady despite her nerves. 3 weeks ago, I came here and said terrible things. I implied that you had ulterior motives for befriending my mother. I questioned your character based on nothing except my own prejudice. What I said was wrong. It was racist, and you didn't deserve it. Marcus didn't respond, just watched her with those old eyes in a young face. Last week, I was at Morrison's. I saw you give $40 to a woman who needed help, and I realized that everything I'd accused you of, everything I'd suspected, it was all in my head. It was based on the color of your skin, and the neighborhood you live in, not on who you actually are. Why were you at the store? Marcus asked quietly. Catherine had prepared for evasion, for a polite lie. But looking at this young man who'd shown nothing but integrity, she couldn't do it. I went to watch you, to see if my suspicions were justified. To find evidence that you were taking advantage of my mother. And what did you find? That I was wrong. About everything, that you're exactly who my mother said you were. Kind, selfless, good. And that I judged you based on prejudice, not facts. Marcus nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that, for being honest. He paused. But you should know, what you said, what you implied, it hurt. Not just because it was about me, but because I've heard it my whole life. People see my skin, and they make assumptions. They see the neighborhood I live in, and they write me off. Your words hurt because they weren't new. They were just the same old prejudice dressed up as concern. Catherine felt tears on her face. I know, and I'm sorry. I can't take back what I said, but I want you to know, I'm working on understanding why I said it. Why I reacted the way I did. My daughter's been helping me see my own biases. I've been reading, learning, trying to recognize the prejudices I didn't even know I had. That's good. That's important work. They sat in uncomfortable silence. Then Marcus said, I appreciate your apology, but I need you to understand something. I didn't befriend your mother to get anything from her. I helped her because she needed help, and I could help. That's it. There's no angle, no ulterior motive, just kindness. I believe you. I see that now. And your mother, she's been there for me and my grandmother in ways I can't repay. She's family to us now, real family, so if you're back in her life, that's good. She needs you, but she also needs me, and I'm not going anywhere just because it makes you uncomfortable. I wouldn't ask you to, Catherine said quickly. I'm not here to push you out. I'm here to apologize, and to try to make things right with my mother. You being in her life, that's good. I'm grateful for it, even if I didn't show it before. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I accept your apology, but trust, that's going to take time. You can't expect me to trust you just because you said sorry once. I understand. I'll work to earn it. After Marcus left, Catherine stayed with Margaret for another hour. They talked about small things. Emma's college applications, Jackson's basketball games, Margaret's book club that met at the library, normal things, family things. He's not going to trust me easily, Catherine said as she prepared to leave. Would you, if you were him? Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. Just keep showing up, Catherine. That's all any of us can do. Keep showing up and proving through our actions that we mean what we say. Over the next 6 weeks, Catherine did exactly that. She visited Margaret twice a week, bringing groceries, helping with errands, just spending time together. Sometimes Marcus was there, and those visits were awkward at first. Polite conversation, careful distance, everyone on their best behavior. But slowly something shifted. Catherine saw how Marcus interacted with her mother, patient, kind, treating her like she mattered. She saw how he'd fix things without being asked, how he'd bring small gifts from the store's clearance section, how he'd call just to check in. And Marcus saw Catherine showing up consistently, week after week, rebuilding her relationship with Margaret through presence and effort. In mid-March, Catherine was at Margaret's apartment when Marcus arrived with Grandma Lorraine. It was the first time Catherine had met her, and she felt a rush of nervousness. Mrs. Turner, I'm Catherine, Margaret's daughter. Grandma Lorraine looked at her with sharp assessing eyes. I've heard about you. I'm sure you have. Catherine took a breath. I owe you an apology too. I said things about your grandson that were wrong. He's a remarkable young man, and you've raised him well. Grandma's expression softened slightly. He is remarkable, and yes, I raised him right, taught him to see people for who they are, not what they look like, or where they come from. The implication was clear. Catherine nodded, accepting it. That's a lesson I'm still learning. Better late than never, I suppose. They had dinner together. Catherine had brought food from a nice restaurant, too much of it, nervous about making a good impression. The conversation was stilted at first, everyone being careful, but gradually it relaxed. Emma and Jackson came with Catherine the next time, and the dynamic shifted again. Emma, with her teenager's blend of idealism and directness, connected with Marcus immediately. Jackson was shyer, but Marcus drew him out by asking about his interests, his games, his life. By April the visits felt less like obligations and more like gatherings. Catherine started bringing her husband James, who'd wanted to meet the young man who'd made such an impression. James and Marcus bonded over a shared love of basketball, debating teams and trades with good-natured intensity. One evening in late April, after everyone had left except Catherine, Margaret said, "Thank you. For what? For trying, for showing up, for giving Marcus a chance to see that you're more than that one terrible moment. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You didn't have to forgive me, you could have cut me off completely. You're my daughter. I'll always love you, even when I don't like what you do." Margaret smiled. "Besides, I think you're really trying. I see it. I am. And Mom, I want to do something to help. I know Marcus gave up his scholarship to take care of Mrs. Turner. What if I could help with that? Make it possible for him to go back to school?" Margaret's eyes widened. "Catherine, that's very generous, but you'll need to approach it carefully. Marcus has a lot of pride. He won't want charity. I know, I've been thinking about how to do it right. Legal protections, so he knows I can't pull funding. Maybe through a trust, managed by a third party. I want to help, but I want to do it in a way that respects his dignity. Let me talk to him first. Feel him out. If he's open to it, then we can discuss details." A week later, Margaret broached the subject with Marcus. His first reaction was exactly what they'd expected: resistance, pride, fear of obligation. "I can't take that much money from her. What if she changes her mind? What if she decides I'm not worth it after all?" That's why it would be set up legally, with protections. "Catherine wants to do this right, Marcus. She wants to help because you gave her mother back to her. Because you showed her who she could be instead of who she'd become. I need to think about it. Talk to Grandma." That night Marcus told Grandma everything. She listened, then said exactly what he needed to hear. "Baby, you've been carrying this burden alone for so long. It's okay to let someone else help carry it for a while. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But what if nothing? You take this opportunity, you go to school, you become everything you're capable of becoming. That's how you honor all the people who've helped you, by using what they give you to become who you're meant to be." 2 days later Marcus called Catherine. "I'd like to talk about your offer. but I have a lot of questions, and I need guarantees. Of course, let me set up a meeting with my lawyer. We'll make sure everything is documented, protected, official. You'll have security. They met at Howard Brennan's office in early May. The lawyer walked Marcus through every detail: the trust fund, the protections, the terms. It took 3 hours and 2 follow-up meetings before Marcus finally hesitantly agreed. "Thank you," he said to Catherine afterward, the words coming with difficulty. It's everything. But I need you to know, I'm not comfortable yet. With you, with this arrangement, with all of it. It's going to take time. I understand. And Marcus, I'm going to keep showing up, keep proving that you can trust me, however long it takes." "Okay, then we have a deal." The next step was finding the right person to help care for Grandma Lorraine. Catherine had several candidates, but it was Margaret who suggested Sharon Williams. "I met her at the senior center," Margaret said. "She takes care of Mrs. Johnson down the hall from me. Kind woman, very professional. And Mrs. Johnson speaks very highly of her." Sharon Williams had been a home health aide for 15 years, ever since her own mother had needed care and Sharon had discovered her calling. She had 3 kids of her own, knew what it was like to balance work and worry, and she saw in Marcus the same fierce love she felt for her family. When Sharon met Grandma Lorraine for the first time, there was an immediate connection. Sharon didn't talk down to her, didn't treat her like a burden or a patient. She treated her like a person who deserved respect and dignity, which of course she was. "I like her," Grandma told Marcus after Sharon's first visit. "She's got spine, and she doesn't fuss over me like I'm helpless." "That's exactly what we need," Marcus said, relief flooding through him. Finding someone he could trust with Grandma had been his biggest worry about going back to school. "You go learn, baby," Grandma said. "Sharon and I will be just fine." As Marcus left the lawyer's office, Catherine sat back and took a shaky breath. It wasn't forgiveness yet. Maybe it never would be complete forgiveness, but it was a start, and sometimes a start was everything. Summer session started with a placement test that determined Marcus would begin as a second semester freshman, having lost credit for the time away. It didn't matter, he was here, and that was everything. His classes were intense: Introduction to Psychology, English Composition, College Algebra, Introduction to Sociology. The professors moved fast, expecting students to keep up, to read hundreds of pages per week, to think critically about everything. Marcus loved it. After 20 months of scanning groceries and watching his mind atrophy, being challenged intellectually felt like coming alive again. He read every assignment twice, attended every office hour, asked questions without embarrassment. His roommate was a kid named Connor from the suburbs, whose biggest concern seemed to be whether his gaming PC would fit on the desk. They were cordial but not friends. Connor had his group, kids who'd grown up with money who'd never worried about rent or food, and Marcus had his solitude. Until the second week, when he met Jasmine. She was in his sociology class, always sitting in the front row, always asking the questions Marcus was thinking but didn't have the courage to voice. After class one day she approached him in the hallway. "You're Marcus, right? Row 4, always taking detailed notes." "Yeah, that's me. I'm Jasmine Turner. No relation, I assume." She grinned. "Don't think so. Damn, I was hoping we were long-lost cousins or something. Would make family reunions more interesting." She shifted her backpack. "Look, a few of us are forming a study group for sociology. You interested?" Marcus hesitated. Study groups meant socializing, meant letting people close enough to ask questions about his life. "I usually work better alone. Come on, it's just 3 of us. Me, a guy named David, and another girl, Keisha. We meet tomorrow at 4 in the student center. Try it once. If you hate it, you never have to come back." Something in Jasmine's expression reminded Marcus of his mother, that particular kind of determination that didn't accept excuses. "Okay, one time." "Perfect." Jasmine beamed. "Oh, and Marcus, we're all here on scholarships or financial aid. Different stories, but we get it. The pressure, the imposter syndrome, all of it. You're not alone." The next day Marcus found himself in a corner of the student center with 3 other students. David was nervous energy and quick intelligence, first-generation college student whose parents owned a restaurant. Keisha was quiet and observant, a single mother of 2 toddlers who somehow managed full-time classes. And then there was Jasmine, who held them all together with her enthusiasm and refusal to let anyone give up when concepts got difficult. They studied for 2 hours, and it was the best academic experience Marcus had since high school. They challenged each other, explained concepts in different ways, built on each other's ideas. By the end, Marcus had agreed to come back. Over the summer session, the study group became the center of Marcus's college experience. They expanded beyond sociology, helping each other with math homework and essay revisions. David knew chemistry like he'd invented it. Keisha could explain statistics in ways that actually made sense. Jasmine kept them organized and on track. And Marcus discovered he had something to offer too. His careful reading, his attention to detail, his ability to connect concepts across disciplines, they were valuable. He was valuable. You should tutor, Jasmine told him one evening as they walked back from the library. Seriously, you're better at explaining this stuff than half the TAs. The tutoring center pays $15 an hour. Catherine's stipend covers everything I need, Marcus said, then paused. But maybe I could save it, or donate it. Actually, yeah, I'll apply. By July, Marcus was tutoring 3 students a week in various subjects, and he discovered he loved it. The moment when concepts clicked, when students went from confused to confident, when education became empowerment. He called Grandma every day, sometimes twice. She was doing well with Sharon's help, her health improving with proper care and nutrition. Margaret visited her regularly, the two of them having become genuine friends. And Catherine was slowly becoming part of the fabric of their lives. She visited Margaret twice a week now, consistently, without fail. Sometimes Marcus was there, and while things were still a bit awkward, the tension had eased considerably from those first painful weeks. "You sound happy, baby," Grandma said one night during their call. "Really happy." "I am. Classes are hard but good. I'm making friends. I'm learning so much. That's all I ever wanted for you, to have this chance, to become who you're meant to be. I miss you though. I miss you too, but I'm proud of you. So proud I could burst." Summer session ended in early August. Marcus had aced all 4 classes, earning a 3.9 GPA, 1 A- in math, but he'd take it. He had a 2-week break before fall semester started, and he spent it at home with Grandma. The apartment felt different now, brighter, cleaner, more organized thanks to Sharon's influence. Grandma looked healthier, moved easier, smiled more. The burden Marcus had been carrying for 20 months had been lifted, and it showed in both of them. "You've grown," Grandma said one evening as they watched TV together. "I'm the same height, Grandma." "Not like that. You've grown into yourself. You stand taller. You don't look scared all the time." Marcus thought about that. She was right. The constant anxiety about money, about survival, about whether they'd make it to the end of the month, it had been replaced by something lighter. Not absence of worry, but presence of hope. "It's because of you," he said. "Because you let me go. Because you told me it was okay to accept help." "Well, I'm wise like that." Grandma grinned. "Now tell me about these friends of yours. This Jasmine girl you mention a lot." "Grandma, it's not like that. We're just study partners." "Moo, whatever you say, baby." Catherine visited during Marcus's break, bringing Emma and Jackson. The kids had warmed to Marcus over the summer months, Emma texting him about her college essays, Jackson sending him gaming videos they'd both find funny. It felt natural now, this extended family they'd built. "How's school going?" Catherine asked Marcus one afternoon while they helped Margaret and Grandma prepare dinner. "Really well, better than I expected, honestly. I'm glad." "And Marcus," Catherine's voice was careful, "I know I said this before, but thank you for giving me the chance to prove myself. I know I didn't deserve it, after what I said." "You're showing up," Marcus said simply, consistently, for Margaret, for Grandma. That matters more than words. "Still, I want you to know I haven't forgotten how I acted. I'm still working on understanding my own biases." Emma's been helping me read books about implicit bias and systemic racism. It's been eye-opening. Marcus looked at her, surprised. "That's good. That's important work. I have a lot to learn, but I'm trying. I can see that." And he could. The Catherine who stood in Margaret's kitchen now was different from the woman who'd barged in 7 months ago, full of judgment and fear. Not completely different. Trust was still being built, but changed enough that Marcus could acknowledge the effort. Fall semester started in late August, and with it came Marcus's declaration of major social work. He'd been drawn to it throughout summer session, fascinated by the intersection of individual struggle and systemic issues, by the possibility of helping people navigate systems that weren't built for them. His classes got harder: social work theory, human behavior in the social environment, research methods, cultural diversity, but he was ready. He'd lived enough of what he was studying to bring unique perspective to every discussion. His professors noticed. Dr. Emily Bradford, who taught social work theory, called him into her office in October. "Marcus, I've been reviewing your work. Your papers show a level of insight that's rare in undergraduates. You're not just learning theory, you're connecting it to lived experience in ways that deepen both." "Thank you, Dr. Bradford. I want to encourage you to think about graduate school. With your perspective and your intellect, you could make significant contributions to the field. It's early to be thinking about this, but I want you to know it's possible." Graduate school. Marcus had been so focused on just finishing his bachelor's degree that he hadn't thought beyond it. But hearing Dr. Bradford say it, hearing that it was possible, it opened up new vistas of future. That November, Marcus went home for Thanksgiving. Catherine had invited everyone to Connecticut: Marcus, Grandma, Margaret, and Sharon. Her house was large and elegant, decorated with professional taste, filled with the warmth of family gathering. Emma and Jackson greeted Marcus like an older brother now, the awkwardness of early meetings long gone. Emma immediately pulled him aside to show him her college acceptance letters. "I got into Johns Hopkins," she squealed. "Pre-med program. That's amazing, Emma. Your parents must be so proud." "They are. But I wanted to tell you first, you helped me so much with my essays." Over Thanksgiving dinner, Marcus looked around the table at this family he'd somehow accumulated. Grandma and Margaret chatting like old friends, Sharon telling stories that had everyone laughing, Catherine and her husband James being warm and welcoming, Emma and Jackson treating him like he'd always been part of the family. It had taken time, 9 months since that first terrible encounter, but they'd built something real. "I want to propose a toast," Catherine said, standing with her wine glass. 15 months ago, my mother and I were barely speaking. I was avoiding her because I was ashamed and guilty and didn't know how to fix what I'd broken. Then Marcus came into our lives, first into Mom's life, then eventually into mine." She looked at Marcus. "I didn't handle it well at first. I said and did things I'm deeply ashamed of. But Marcus and Mom, and all of you, gave me the chance to do better, to be better. You showed me that family isn't about perfection, it's about showing up, about doing the work, about earning trust through consistent action." She raised her glass. "So this toast is to all of you, to second chances and chosen family, to the long road of earning trust, and to Marcus, who started all of this by giving away $1 he couldn't afford to lose." Everyone raised their glasses, and Marcus felt tears threatening. He'd done nothing extraordinary. He'd just been kind, just helped where he could, just showed up. And somehow it had been enough. That night, in the guest room Catherine had prepared for him, Marcus texted Margaret, "Thank you for believing in me, for defending me, for giving me the space to decide whether to trust Catherine again." Her response came quickly. "You gave her the gift of a second chance. That takes courage. I'm proud of you." Marcus fell asleep feeling grateful, feeling hopeful, feeling like maybe he really did deserve all the good things that were happening. Spring semester arrived with Marcus more confident, more settled into college life. He'd made Dean's List in the fall. His tutoring position had expanded. He now worked with 6 students regularly. He joined the social work club and volunteered at a homeless shelter on weekends. But there was a cost to all this success, one Marcus hadn't fully acknowledged. He was running himself into the ground, trying to prove he deserved what he'd been given, trying to earn what had been freely offered. "You need to slow down," Jasmine told him one evening in late February when she found him in the library at 11 p.m., working on a paper that wasn't due for another week. "You're going to burn out." "I'm fine, I just want to make sure it's perfect." "Marcus, you made Dean's List. You're tutoring half the freshman class. You volunteer 10 hours a week. You're more than fine. You're exceeding every expectation. Give yourself permission to breathe." But Marcus couldn't, because despite everything, despite Catherine's consistency, despite the legal protections, despite the trust they'd built over 15 months, part of him still waited for it all to disappear, for someone to say he wasn't worth it after all. "I can't mess this up," he told Jasmine. "Catherine took a chance on me, so did Margaret. If I fail, you're not going to fail. But even if you did, even if you got a B instead of an A, do you really think they'd abandon you, after everything?" Marcus knew she was right. Catherine had proven herself consistent for over a year now. She visited Margaret religiously. She checked in with Marcus monthly, not hovering, just present. She'd even started a college fund for other students like Marcus through her family foundation, inspired by his story. But old fears died hard. In early March, Dr. Bradford called him to her office again. "Marcus, I want to talk to you about your senior thesis. I know you're only a sophomore, but you should start thinking about it. The thesis is a significant undertaking. Original research, literature review, 50 to 70 pages. Students who plan ahead do better." "Okay, what should I focus on?" "That's up to you, but I'd encourage you to draw on your experiences. Maybe something about dignity in social services or community-based support systems. You have unique insights that could make for compelling research." They talked for an hour about possible topics, methodologies, theoretical frameworks. By the time Marcus left, his head was spinning with possibilities. That night he started outlining ideas, unable to sleep, his mind racing. He'd focus on dignity-centered approaches in social work practice. He'd research how small interventions could create massive change. He'd tell Margaret's story, with her permission, and use it as a case study in how kindness could ripple outward. But as March turned into April, Marcus noticed changes in Grandma that made his chest tight with worry. "How's Grandma?" Jasmine asked during one of their study sessions in mid-March. Marcus rubbed his eyes. "She's struggling. Sharon says she's been having dizzy spells, and last week she got confused about what day it was. Just for a few minutes, but it scared me." "Has she seen a doctor?" "We got her in for a checkup. They're worried about her blood pressure, want to do more tests, but she keeps saying she's fine, that it's just old age." The worry sat in Marcus's stomach like a stone. He called Grandma every day now, sometimes 3 times, listening for changes in her voice, for signs that something was wrong. In early April he went home for a weekend visit, and found Grandma moving even more slowly than usual. She'd forgotten to take her blood pressure medication for 3 days. "I just got mixed up, baby," she said when he asked. "All these pills look the same." But Marcus saw the worry in Sharon's eyes. "This is the 3rd time this month," Sharon said quietly, when Grandma couldn't hear. "I think we need to increase my hours. She needs more supervision." Marcus felt the familiar weight of helplessness. Even with help, even with resources, age and illness didn't care about what was fair or what he'd already been through. "I'll talk to Catherine," Marcus said. "See if we can get Sharon here more often." "It's not just about hours, Marcus. Your grandmother is getting older. These things, the confusion, the dizziness, they're warning signs. We need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" Sharon's expression was gentle but honest. "For the fact that she won't be here forever. I'm not saying it's imminent, but these signs mean we need to pay close attention." Marcus went back to campus that Sunday with a knot in his chest that wouldn't loosen. He tried to focus on his classes, on his tutoring, on his life. But part of him was always home, always worried, always waiting for the call that would change everything. In late April, Dr. Bradford approached him with an opportunity. "The Regional Social Work Conference is in early May. I'd like you to present some of your preliminary thesis research. It's a big opportunity. Professionals from across the state, graduate students, agency directors, interested." May 5th, Marcus checked his calendar. His final exams were the week before. It would be tight, but he could manage. "Yes. Absolutely. Thank you for thinking of me." He spent the next 2 weeks preparing, refining his research, creating slides, practicing his delivery. The study group helped him rehearse. Catherine video called to coach him on presentation techniques. She'd been doing corporate presentations for years and offered tips freely. Margaret read his drafts and provided feedback. "You're going to be amazing," Margaret said. "You're doing work that matters." The week before the conference was brutal. Marcus had 3 final exams, 2 major papers due, and his conference presentation to perfect. He slept 4 hours a night, lived on coffee and granola bars, pushed himself harder than he ever had. On May 2nd, 3 days before the conference, he finished his last final exam. He felt good about it, felt good about everything. He was going to present his research, show everyone what he'd learned, prove he belonged in this field. Then his phone rang at 3 p.m. Sharon's name on the screen. "Marcus, don't panic. Your grandmother's okay, but she's had a fall." The world tilted. "What happened?" "She got dizzy, lost her balance. I was here, thank God. She didn't hit her head. But she's complaining of hip and back pain. The ambulance is on its way. We're taking her to City General for x-rays." "I'm coming. I'll be there in 90 minutes. Marcus was already running to his dorm, throwing things into a bag. The conference was in 3 days. His presentation was ready. But Grandma was hurt. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. He called Dr. Bradford from the bus. "I'm so sorry, but there's a family emergency. My grandmother fell and I need to be with her. I can't make the conference." "Marcus, I'm so sorry to hear that. Of course family comes first. Is there anything I can do? No, I'm sorry I'm letting you down. You're not letting anyone down. These things happen. We'll find another opportunity. Take care of your grandmother. Marcus called Margaret next. She was already on her way to the hospital. Catherine's coming too. We'll be there until you arrive. The 45-minute bus ride felt like hours. Marcus stared at his phone, willing it to ring with updates, terrified of what news might come. At City General, Marcus found Grandma in the emergency room lying on a bed with Margaret and Catherine on either side of her. She looked small and frail in a way that made his chest hurt. There he is, Grandma said, trying to smile. My overachiever, you didn't have to come, baby. I told these ladies you had that important conference. Grandma, nothing is more important than you. Marcus took her hand, checking for injuries. What did the doctor say? Waiting on x-rays, Catherine answered. But the paramedics didn't think anything was broken. They waited 2 hours for x-ray results. Another hour for a doctor to read them. Marcus paced, checked his watch, thought about his presentation slides, sitting on his laptop, about the opportunity he was missing. But mostly thought about Grandma, and how he'd never forgive himself if something happened while he was off giving a presentation. At 6 p.m., a young doctor appeared. Good news. No fractures, no breaks. She has significant bruising on her hip and lower back, and she'll be sore for several days, but there's no serious injury. We want to keep her overnight for observation, given her recent dizzy spells and the fall, but she should be able to go home tomorrow. Marcus sat down hard, in the plastic chair, relief making his legs weak. See, Grandma said. I told you it wasn't serious. Now you can still make your conference. I'm not leaving you. Marcus Turner, you listen to me. I am fine. These wonderful people are here. You have an opportunity you've worked hard for. Don't waste it because of a fall. But no buts. Grandma's voice was firm. I didn't let you accept help so you could give up opportunities every time I have a setback. You worked hard on that presentation. You're going to go deliver it. Margaret spoke up. Marcus, Catherine and I will stay with your grandmother tonight. Sharon will be here too. Lorraine is stable, she's conscious, and she's going to be okay. You're going to go back to campus, you're going to present your research, and then you're going to come back tomorrow afternoon. Deal? I don't know if I can focus on the presentation knowing she's you. You can and you will, Catherine said firmly. Then more gently, Marcus, you've trusted me for over a year now. Trust me with this. We've got your grandmother. She's in good hands, and she needs you to succeed tomorrow more than she needs you sitting by her hospital bed tonight. Marcus looked between the three women, his grandmother, his friend, what was Catherine now? Not quite family, but more than friend. Someone who'd earned a place through consistent action over 15 months. Okay, he said finally. But call me if anything changes. Anything. We promise, Margaret said. Marcus leaned down and kissed Grandma's forehead. I love you, and I'm going to make you proud tomorrow. You make me proud every day, baby, just by being you. The bus back to campus was torture. Marcus checked his phone every 5 minutes, waiting for updates. They came regularly from Margaret. Lorraine settled, ate dinner, watching TV, resting, sleeping now. Back in his dorm, Marcus tried to review his presentation but couldn't concentrate. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine at midnight. Your grandmother is sleeping peacefully. Sharon just did a full check. Vitals are good, no pain when she's still. She's going to be fine, Marcus. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you show them what you're made of. You've earned this. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. A year ago a text from Catherine would have felt like obligation, like pressure. Now it felt like support, like family. He finally slept around 3 and woke at 7 to more texts. Grandma had a good night. Doctors pleased. She'll be discharged this afternoon. The conference was at a hotel downtown. Marcus arrived at 9:30, registered, found the room where he'd present at 11. His hands were shaking as he set up his laptop, as he looked out at the 60 or so professionals who'd be judging his work. He thought about Grandma in her hospital bed, trusting him to be here. About Margaret and Catherine who'd stayed all night so he could have this chance. About Sharon, who'd rearranged her schedule to help. About his mother who dreamed of him succeeding. At 11 a.m., Marcus walked to the front of the room and began. My presentation today is about dignity-centered approaches in social work practice. But before I discuss theory, I want to tell you a story about how this research began. He told them about that November night, about Margaret and her 85 cents, about the choice he'd made and everything that followed. He connected his personal experience to research, to literature, to practical applications. He spoke for 30 minutes, and the room was silent except for his voice. When he finished, there was a pause, that terrible moment when a speaker doesn't know if they've connected, and then applause. Real applause, sustained and warm. The Q&A was intense, agency directors asking about implementation, graduate students wanting methodology details, a woman from the State Department of Social Services giving him her card. "We need people like you in this field," she said. "People who understand both the theory and the lived experience." After his session, people wanted to talk, to exchange cards, to discuss his ideas. It was everything he'd hoped for. But all Marcus could think about was getting back to the city, back to Grandma. At noon, he made his excuses and left. On the bus he called Margaret. "How is she?" "Being discharged right now. Catherine's with her. We're taking her back to the apartment. Sharon's already there getting everything ready. I'm on my way." "Marcus, how did it go?" "Good, really good. But I need to see Grandma." At the apartment, he found her settled in her chair with pillows, Margaret, Catherine and Sharon all fussing over her. "Well?" Grandma asked. "How was it?" Marcus knelt beside her chair. "Are you really okay?" "Bruised and sore, but okay. Now tell me about your presentation." So Marcus did, the applause, the questions, the connections he'd made. And as he talked, surrounded by the women who'd become his family, he realized something important. He hadn't had to choose between them and his future. They were part of his future, woven into everything he was becoming. "I'm so proud of you," Grandma said. "Your mama would be too. I couldn't have done any of this without all of you." Marcus replied, looking at Margaret, Catherine and Sharon. "You gave me the chance to succeed. But more than that, you showed me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And that trust, real trust, is built slowly, through actions, not words." He looked at Catherine specifically. "Thank you for being consistent, for proving over and over that you meant what you said. I know it took time for me to really believe it, but I do now." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for giving me that time, for not requiring instant forgiveness, for making me earn it." That evening, they all stayed, crowded into the apartment, eating Sharon's soup, telling stories, laughing because they'd gotten through another crisis together. Marcus looked around at these women who'd saved him in different ways, and he made himself a promise. He'd spend his life paying this forward. He'd become the kind of social worker who saw people the way they'd seen him, fully human, deserving of dignity, worthy of investment. And he'd teach others that trust and family could be built, brick by brick, through consistent action and patient understanding. Junior year passed in a blur of classes, research, and deepening relationships. Marcus kept his dean's list standing, expanded his tutoring, and began shaping his senior thesis in earnest. His work on dignity-centered social work practice was drawing interest from professors and practitioners, a signal that this research mattered. Grandma recovered from her fall, though she moved more slowly now, more aware of her limits. Sharon increased her hours, the apartment gained grab bars, better lighting and quiet reassurances that she was never alone. Catherine had, by then, become fully woven into their extended family, visiting Margaret weekly, supporting Grandma's medical needs, including Marcus in holidays as naturally as if he'd always been one of her own. The trust that had taken 15 months to earn was now solid, strengthened by consistency. Senior year arrived with its familiar mix of anticipation and fear. The thesis consumed him. From transaction to transformation had grown from an academic idea into something larger, a manuscript shaped by lived experience and sharpened by theory. Dr. Bradford pushed him harder than anyone ever had. "This is publishable, Marcus. If you're willing to challenge yourself." He was. He spent months interviewing social workers, surveying clients, dissecting case studies. By late fall, the thesis had grown to 73 pages, dense, reasoned and deeply personal. But the introduction eluded him. One November night at 2 a.m., he stared at the blinking cursor. "How did you explain $1? How did you quantify the value of dignity?" He pulled up the photo Margaret had taken years ago, him at 18, thin, tired, behind register 4, handing over $1 he desperately needed. That Marcus hadn't known what he was starting. He'd just done what Mom and Grandma taught him, be kind where you can. He began typing. This thesis began with a single $1, not because the dollar itself had value, though for an 18-year-old with $7 to his name it certainly did. But because of what it represented, the choice to see another person's dignity as more important than your own immediate need. That moment lasted 15 seconds. Its effects lasted years. Something clicked. Small kindnesses weren't small at all. His defense was set for May 14th. The work was polished, the committee supportive. All he needed was to show up. The week before he visited home, Grandma insisted she was just tired, but Marcus saw the strain. Sharon admitted the doctor had called it age, but they were monitoring her closely. Go do your defense, she told him. She'd chase you out herself if you stayed. On the morning of May 14th, Marcus stepped into the conference room. His bound thesis lay on the table. Dr. Bradford nodded. Whenever you're ready, he began. He told them about Margaret and the 85 cents, Catherine's initial prejudice and her long journey back from it. The family built slowly from trust and second chances. He told them about Grandma's recent health scares and the way crises had been met together. Then he anchored his story in research, social capital, strength-based practice, community psychology. He presented interviews, surveys, and data that supported his premise. Dignity-centered practice worked. He spoke for 45 minutes. The questions afterward were rigorous and unrelenting. Marcus answered each with the clarity of someone who had lived his subject matter, not merely studied it. 90 minutes later, he was sent into the hall. He paced, checked his phone. Sharon had texted, "Your grandmother is resting," asking about your defense. The door finally opened. Dr. Bradford smiled. "Congratulations, Marcus. That was one of the finest defenses I've seen in 20 years. Highest distinction." The relief hit him so hard he had to sit. After everything, poverty, deferrals, fear, he'd done it. "You should consider doctoral programs," Dr. Bradford added. "Your work deserves to continue." Marcus took the bus home immediately. In the apartment, Grandma sat in her chair, small but alert, Margaret and Catherine on either side. "Well?" she asked. "I passed. Highest distinction." Her face lit up, pride soft but unmistakable. "That's my boy." He knelt and took her hand. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without all of you. That's what family does," Margaret said softly. "That's what love does," Catherine added. "Real love, earned through action." Grandma squeezed his hand. "You did the work, baby. We just made sure you had the chance." 2 weeks later, Marcus walked across the stage to receive his Bachelor of Social Work, summa cum laude. The whole family was there. Grandma standing with her cane, Margaret steadying her, Catherine and her children cheering loudest. When his name was called, they all rose together. The applause felt like a blessing. Afterward, Emma asked, "Grad school next?" Eventually Marcus said, "But first something else, a non-profit." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Tell me." "A foundation that gives emergency help with dignity, that connects people to long-term support, that sees people the way Margaret saw me. Humans worthy of investment." Margaret smiled. "What will you call it?" "The Small Kindness Foundation." Catherine's eyes filled. "Let's build it." They did. Over the next 2 years, while Marcus completed his master's at State, they built the foundation from a sketch into a functioning organization. Catherine funded the early stages and brought business structure. Margaret joined the board and reminded them what dignity looked like in everyday life. Grandma, though increasingly frail, attended meetings when she could. Dr. Bradford connected them with researchers, agencies and faculty allies. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jasmine, once study partners, had slowly fallen in love. She had been his constant since the early study group days, grounded, compassionate, steady. Marcus proposed in Grandma's living room, surrounded by the people who had shaped him. "About time," Grandma said, teary and triumphant, when Jasmine said yes. At age 24, Marcus launched the Small Kindness Foundation. Their model was simple: volunteers trained to notice everyday need, offer immediate assistance, and link people to resources with dignity at the center. In the first year, they helped 300 families, over 1,000. Marcus became program director, splitting his time between graduate school and operations. He hired staff who understood lived experience as deeply as theory. He partnered with grocery stores, pharmacies and schools, places where struggle quietly surfaced. He never forgot where it had started. One cold November evening years later, Marcus, now 29, executive director of the foundation, stood in Morrison's grocery. Tom had retired, but Register 4 remained exactly where it had always been. The foundation was launching a partnership here, training employees to identify customers in crisis and connect them to resources. The circle was closing. The current store manager, a woman named Patricia, had embraced the idea immediately. "If this works," she said, "we roll it out across all our stores. Imagine kindness at scale." Marcus ran a hand along the familiar counter. This was the place where an exhausted 18-year-old had given away his last dollar. "You okay?" Patricia asked. "Yeah," he said, just remembering. As he stood there, a young cashier noticed an elderly man coming up short and quietly covered the difference. Marcus approached him afterward. "You did something good," Marcus said. "I'm Marcus Turner, from the Small Kindness Foundation. Can I buy you coffee after your shift? I'd like to tell you a story." Later that night, Marcus waited in the same diner where Margaret once bought him lunch. His phone buzzed. A text from Grandma, now 86. "Don't forget Sunday dinner. Margaret and I are making your favorite." Another text from Catherine. "Board meeting Wednesday. New funding proposals." And Marcus, "Thank you for letting me become who I should have been all along." He replied, "Thank you for showing up." The door opened. Jasmine walked in, tired from a 12-hour shift, but glowing when she saw him. She sat across from him and took his hand. "How'd it go at Morrison's?" "Good," he said. "Really good. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us." He squeezed her hand. "It started with you and $1, she said, smiling. Marcus looked around the diner, at the place where so much had begun. "It started with all of us," he said quietly. "With every person who chose kindness when they didn't have to." They ordered burgers and fries, just like he and Margaret had years before. Marcus felt the familiar warmth rising in his chest, the knowledge that a single small kindness had rippled outward, shaping thousands of lives, including his own. Sometimes nothing was enough. Sometimes it changed everything. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.